Hi everyone, Brody here with the Pride Swell info video for July. This month we'll be making terrariums, which are small ecosystems inside a closed or open container. Our prompt is self-care, community care, and I'll get into that more in a minute. So the materials you'll get in your package include a dinosaur figure, colored sand, multicolored crystal balls called Orbeez that enlarge when put in water, twine for hanging, the glass terrarium vessel, and some artificial colored moss. We encourage you to explore how you can incorporate found materials and materials left over from the previous 11 packages. What objects could you include that are meaningful to you? What could you put inside, hang, or fix to the terrarium? Can you play with the interior and exterior of the vessel? So as I just mentioned, terrariums are technically self-sustaining ecosystems that use layers of rock, charcoal, potting soil, and plants to produce a system where the evaporated water acts to hydrate and feed plant life. They kind of have everything they need. While we aren't necessarily using real plants or organic matter, let this inspire you in the making of your terrarium. So these are some terrariums that use craft-based materials, and they don't exactly support plant life, but maybe they support other kinds of life, and they use the form of the terrarium to display other objects. In this line, our prompt is self-care, community care. We have developed this prompt to catalyze reflection on the ways in which self-care and community care are mutually dependent. So self-care is acts and routines that we intentionally engage in for the sake of our own well-being. In the same way, community care is acts that we engage in to support, sustain, and develop the communities to which we belong. Community can feel like such a slippery term because you often can't exactly see or measure it. I like to think of community as the space between myself and others where our shared humanity connects us. For me, trans feminine community has been indispensable to my well-being for the past year, but in order for me to show up for that community, I also need to look after myself so that I can fully be there for others. This is especially the case when they're materially, economically, and socially disadvantaged and might not have the time or resources to prioritize their own self-care and well-being. I think of self-care and community care as mutually dependent in a sense. Community care is based in the concept of mutual aid, which is a voluntary, reciprocal exchange of resources and services for mutual benefit. In a sense, we're doing a kind of mutual aid here at Pride Swell as we share our experiences and time with one another to learn and grow together. Mutual aid is used in a lot of activist spaces and in social movement work more generally. While self-care often has a commodified reputation as being objects we purchase, like candles and fancy bath bombs, it can also look like making the time to prepare food for a busy week, setting aside time for being alone, and yes, it can also look like a nice bath. It's different for everyone. So let's get to the terrariums. You can begin by gathering your materials as usual and considering what you might need to add. I looped back to include shrinky dinks inside and outside of my terrarium. Once you've got an idea of what you'd like to do, you can begin to add your materials in layers through the small openings on the sides. So here's the sand, and now the Orbeez, which I left as they are, and here's the moss. At the bottom right, you can see some of my Shrinky Dink hearts, and I made some Shrinky Dinks to put inside and also hang on the terrarium. So I hung a clear Shrinky Dink sheet on which I wrote intentions for my own self-care on one side and my intentions for community care on the other. The Shrinky Dink got a bit distorted, so I'm going to read them out. To start with self-care, I wrote mindfulness practice, fresh air and sunlight, spending time alone, keeping healthy boundaries, cooking fancy meals, and reading things that give me hope. For community care, I wrote invest in queer and trans community, invest in mutual aid and material support for trans feminine community, prioritize harm reduction, use privilege to facilitate difficult conversations, and using art to centralize my community's concerns and needs. And here you can see the Shrinky Dinks all strung on the terrarium. And here you can see my final terrarium hung in my room, where I've been keeping it to remind myself of these intentions when I feel lost or a little hopeless. So as always, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Casey if you have any questions or want any assistance thinking through the prompt. I also wanted to give everyone a big thank you, as this is our last package prompt. It's been really warm and fulfilling to see some of you at the Zoom meetups and see a lot of your creations on social media. That's all for now. Take care.